Okay, hello, welcome back to the channel. Different video today. I have not got a cool t-shirt on, but I do have a cool coffee cup, so you'll have to forgive me for that. If I keep looking over here, I've got a different setup and I can see myself here, but I'm obviously talking to here, so that's going to take a little bit of getting used to, and I apologize in advance for that. But today we have a different video. I reached out on Instagram through my Instagram stories asking you guys whether you thought it'd be a good idea to see me and my sort of editing style and my flow through how I go from looking at a picture, choosing a photo that I want to edit, and then my editing process. And then you guys thought it was a good idea, potentially going to submit some of your own photos to edit. And because I've got a pretty manic schedule for the next week, on Saturday I leave for India. My cousin's getting married out there, and then I come back and I'm straight into Bird Fair. I don't really have time to make two videos. I'll miss two videos unless we do something different, and so this is different. This is what we're going to do. So I've got 2 weeks worth of editing videos coming your way. This first week, we're going to go through some of my photos. I'm going to pick some of the trickier ones to edit, some of the better ones that I have that don't really need editing, but I'll show you what I do with them anyway. Technical things like export settings, don't even ask me. Google it, you'll work it out. I am the least tech savvy guy you will ever meet. I know what works for me, I know what has been working, and that's about as far as we can get. So without further ado, let's get into it. We'll look at a few. I've sort of hand selected already a few of my photos that I would normally pick, and like I say, some of them are harder, some of them are easier, and they'll all have sort of similar things running through them. So lock in, let's enjoy, and see what we can do. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to the original import so you can see exactly what I would see. Now this is dark. This image is dark. So when I'm scrolling through my photos, when I'm making my selections, first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to see, let's have a look at the potential. See how sharp it is. That is what I'm looking at mainly. And there's a lot of noise in this photo, but it's sharp and it's interesting because these feet, these incredible tree creeper claws, are not actually on the bark. It's doing its little jump up. Now this image is essentially the story of a pair of tree creepers that have made a home in these fence panels, which is what's the unusual side of this story. They're not in a tree, they're in this urban environment in my garden, which is incredibly lucky. But the fence panels have to play a role in it because that's what makes this image different. That's the sort of story of this image. So immediately I know that when I crop, these fence panels have to be included in that. Now this was taken on a tripod with a lot of thought and intent, so the crop should never be too intense. My immediate thinking with the crop is going to be whether we want these lines straight or not. And I already can't remember what the original edit looked like. Now for me, I always do 4:3. That's just habit, it's just what I enjoy. I'm kind of trying to fight the 16:9 ratio. For whatever reason, this is what I prefer printing wise, and that's ultimately what I enjoy editing wise as well. So I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, okay, let's use the rule of thirds. If you don't know what the rule of thirds are, you can see on these grid lines here, you know, there's images separated into thirds, and I want a nice balance. So to me, that's too tight on this side, so we're probably gonna have to rule that out, which makes me think that we want to have sort of the middle fence here. So I'm going to click in and look, and I still think when I press enter here, we're still way too tight on this side. So now I'm thinking, okay, landscape probably isn't going to work for this photo, but we do always have the vertical. Now bear with me because I don't know the shortcut for this. Like I say, I'm not tech savvy, and that leads us then to this crop. And what's nice about this crop is we have this sort of, there's a few lines that we can follow with our crop which kind of help balance the image out, and I think I'm going to come over to the side even a little bit more, and I don't like this negative space at the bottom. So for a crop, again, it's just a little bit too tight, and now because we're so tight on this right hand side, there's not much space here on the tree creeper side. I'm thinking, okay, let's just get rid of this whole black space, and we're going to go with something like this, and we have a nice crop there. We still have the interest in the fence panels. We could potentially leave a little bit of that space in, but that's going to change every time I look at it. I'm going to think something different here, but ultimately that's probably where I'm going to finish. And I always tend to do crop first. That's always my go-to. Second thing I always do, I'm looking at these masks. Now you can just press this and go to subject, and it'll try and find something. This is a dark image, so I imagine it's going to struggle. But it's done it quite well this time. I've had problems with subjects in the past, and so what I tend to lean more towards is just doing object. Object is how I like to do it, and I'm just going to run over and see what it selects out there. And it's exactly the same as the subjects, but that's just habit now for me. Now I think we probably have missed a bit of this feather here at the back, but that's fine. So next thing, once I got my subject mask, I always just do a little bit of texture and I always do a little bit of clarity. I just think it helps really that bird stand out. Obviously if we go too far it looks ridiculous. Always subtle changes, and you'll see, you know, throughout this video as I edit, I always take things far and then dial them back, because I like to see just where that sort of tipping point is and where I like to be. So once I've got my texture and stuff like that, the next thing I'm going to think about is inverting this mask and just taking that exposure down a couple of stops. I like here where you can see immediately it just doesn't look right. We have this natural dark area on the right, but this fence really shouldn't be as dark. So potentially what we can do is add a linear gradient on this side. We can remove our bird, our tree creeper, and we can just take the stops down that way, and that way the fence stays quite nice and bright. Obviously our exposure is up quite a lot already, and I think I'm going to have to pull the blacks up. As you can see, these blue spots here, this is where our blacks are peaking. Is that the right word for blacks? Shadows? I think they're peaking. I always have these little triangles clicked so I can see what's peaking and what isn't. I think, this is where I'm going to sound like an idiot, but this is the way I think about it. If there's blue there, there's no information in that part of the image, which is unnatural. There should always be, even in the darkest shadows, there should be a little bit of information, and the blue dots represent zero information. Now this is a dark image. This was taken at sunrise in a shaded spot of my house, and so we're never going to be able to get the light that we want. I think there's a window at like 6:15 or something like that where the light hit this fence beautifully and we wouldn't have had to worry about this, but 99% of the time when I was photographing these birds, it was dark. And that darkness was a problem. So I'm always going to be playing with my shadows. Immediately you can see that that's too much. Now we do have denoise, which I'm going to show you in a second, but I just like to have a little play with these sliders and see what looks good and what doesn't. A little bit of contrast there looks okay. And then I'm going to come down. Now, for me, this tree creeper, that's too blue for what a tree creeper should be. So we're just going to take this out. Now you can use the color picker. I know that this is meant to be pretty white. That for me is not quite right. So we're going to drop that back down. And we're going to do something like this. And that's fine for a quick one and done edit. And then the last thing I'm going to do, I'm going to look at my S curve on this tones. Again, I just don't think about it too much. I kind of just drop it down a little bit, take it up a little bit. And we're looking at something like that. I think it's still a bit too yellow. Now we still have this. We still have a little bit of peak in here. It's not the cleanest of images. I really don't like the color of the tree creeper. We could potentially look at changing the temperature directly on that. That does help. But again, if I had a bit more time, this is one of the trickier images to edit because it's so dark. But I will hit the denoise on that. And as you can see, it's helped a little bit. Now, when I use denoise, I'm always looking, does it look a bit too cartoony? I don't mind noise in an image, but I think for this one, 50 on the denoise is too much. I don't want it to be too smooth. Like, noise is noise. Noise is something that we expect from any sort of photograph. So that's probably what we end up with. So there's the original, there's the after. Obviously, if that first image wasn't so dark, we probably wouldn't have had to spend quite as long on that. I wonder if I can go back to my original. Probably not, but I can pull it up later, potentially. So yeah, that would be that image, nice and quick. Okay, let's see, stop. How long did that take us? Okay, second image. Now this is going to be sort of similar, but when you look at the overall process, it's a bit easier because we're not too focused about cropping in as tight. Now this is a Daubenton's bat taken while I was out scouting with the Peak District National Park Foundation for a nice little charity video, and we saw this guy flying around, and it was incredible. I had to try and snap a few photos. ISO is high, it's in a shallow riverbed, and shutter speed had to be high because it's a bat and it was moving ridiculously fast. So this is what we finished off with, and this is what we started with. Quite a difference, huh? Quite a difference. And for me, when I'm looking at something like this, again, the first thing I'm going to be checking, is it sharp? And it is. It's sharp enough. Obviously, it'll far away and it's dark, but it's sharp enough. There's detail in there that we can pull out, so I'm happy with it. So immediately I'm thinking about crop again. I'm never going to be able to crop in tight on a photo like this because I'm going to have not enough detail. There's not going to be enough information in this image to be able to get a super tight in crop, and that's okay because we have a really cool backdrop. We managed to look out by getting it within these sort of this little window of trees and branches that sort of border our back quite nicely already. So something like that immediately looks fairly okay. Obviously we can play around with position. I remember fiddling with this for quite a while on the actual edit, but for this one I quite like it zoomed out. We could even rotate it. Birds in flight, you don't have to stick to what was the orientation of birds. Bats in, anything in flight where there's nothing really stationary, we don't have to play around. Play around with your natural shapes and your lines. Obviously this one doesn't quite work, but if the bat was slightly different orientated in the air, then we could maybe make the sort of square crop work, but we're not going to. Instead we're going to play with this wing shape, and we're going to use that wing to sort of tell us what orientation this crop should be. Again, I'm at 4:3 just because that's my preference. If you are super into editing for social media at the moment, then you're most likely going to be wanting to crop at a 16:9 vertical, just because that's what social's like. That's fine. This grabs people's attention. You do you. Do what you enjoy. I did that for a long time, and then I decided to just enjoy this sort of 4:3. Let the image decide what crop it should be, and that rhymed, so I apologize for that. So again, we've made our mask. We're looking at a little bit of texture, a little bit of clarity, and then again we're going to duplicate and invert. Now this one, it's dark, okay, and I think if I pull it up, we got some nice color in that. So I don't think I want to do too much. As you can see, I'll always be playing with this crop. It kind of it comes very habitual now, but I don't necessarily want to be making that darker because that background is quite interesting. Obviously it's dark and it's pixelated, but ultimately it's more interesting to me than this is, and that's probably an image we could get away with. And I honestly, again, I cannot remember how we did this crop. I don't know how we exported it previously. It's already gone. But something like that I would enjoy. I'd be quite happy with making it darker. For the sake of this video, we're going to go brighter. And I'm just going to play with these sliders until I find something that I like. And I'm also, just because I don't want to make the back completely sort of isolated, I'm just going to play. Now it could be warmer. This was 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, so having these warm tones makes sense. It wasn't nighttime, but obviously with it being a bat, we sort of expect it to be blues and dark shadows. But because it was out hunting along a river during the day, then I don't mind these sort of warmer green tones, which play really nicely into the background. So one thing we could try on the background is more contrast and maybe dehazing. Don't ask me what dehazing actually does. Don't really understand what haze is. And this is the thing with me, I don't really do the technical side. I don't know what everything is, and I think that's okay because there's so much to learn, and 99% of photography is the photography, for me at least. If I can do it well in camera, if I can do all that, then these sliders is like, it's like shooting ducks in a barrel. Is that what it's like? Probably not. I kind of I fiddle with what I fiddle with, and it ends up working. Obviously we're going to denoise this, and we end up with something like this. Now if we wanted to do a really tight crop, you're going to see that it just doesn't work. It doesn't look good. But as soon as we pull out, and this is one thing that we really need to start doing more of, appreciate that it looks good with the background, and we don't have to be shooting for people to immediately see what we want them to see, because that's a cool image. That's a really nice shot of a really interesting behavior of an animal that we don't often get to see. So why neglect the background? And even this, you know, we got such cool lines and space and just everything to play with that there's no reason to, even if we could trust the tight crop to show off this bat, I prefer this. And that's something that I would leave with. I'd play probably with the temperature a little bit more, looking at those warmer tones and darker tones. We could do both. They both look good in their own right, but because I know what time of day this was shot, sticking with the warmer tones, and we'd leave something like this. So then we look at the before and after. I don't know why Lightroom's messing up like that. But we have the before and after. You can see there's not too much change. I enjoy the messiness of the background, because in the middle here we have this clean space and everything is kind of working to pull our vision towards this. There is a rule of spiral thing. I don't know. There's like a golden spiral compositional rule that sort of plays into this. But that's nice, and that's an image I'd be very happy with. Okay, this one. Now, as you can see, it's dark. Very, very dark. This is what I finished with originally, and this is what caught my eye, this shadow. Now, before I was mentioning, when I was taking pictures of these tree creepers, there was a time of day, really like 20 minutes in the morning, where the light would hit these fence panels intensely, and this is one of them. I mean, look at my ISO compared to the previous one. It's not that much different. Ignore that. My ISO here is 1250, and I'm shooting at 4 thousandths of a second. That's fast, and we still have really, really nice light. You know, it's still a little bit grainy, but that's purely because it was not completely bright everywhere. But with that intense light and that directional sunlight, we have this really interesting shadow, which I really liked, and it really caught my eye. So let's see whether we spot that on the original import. There we go. Look at that. Difficult. And this is one of the things we have to really sort of think about as photographers when we're going through so many images, is what works and what doesn't. And to me, as soon as I take that my exposure up, this is a cool image. And immediately, like, I mean, if we really wanted to shoot big, this is the garage door here, it works really well. We have these really nice blue tones. And as an image overall, if I was thinking, if I have, you know, a minute to stare at a photo on a screen, this one is probably one I would keep big, but it wasn't quite good enough for me at the time, and even still, it's not quite good enough as a whole to keep like that. So I would again be looking to crop in. 4:3. It's taking the vertical, but I want to keep it horizontal for now. I do tend to lean towards more horizontal cropping, just preference. Although I think, did this one start as vertical? I can't remember. My memory is awful. I cannot remember what I saw on screen 30 seconds ago. So immediately, we really like the shadow. I really like that the tree creeper is sharp. We have this sort of feeling of movement. There's also insects in the mouth, whatever that is, some sort of mosquito or Denny Longlegs, whatever it's doing. So there's interest in the story, and the photograph tells more. It's more than just a snapshot. This photograph is telling some sort of story. There's movement, it's in focus, so it's going to be something that we use. Now this is a tricky one to edit, because we have two, see here we got the problem with the masking, where subject misses the toes, and then object doesn't quite do what I want it to do. Maybe I'm using a trackpad as well, so it doesn't help. So in this one I will select subject instead of object, and then I will go into here and add objects and try and get these toes in. And then, as you can see also, now I won't spend too long doing it this time, but when we are editing photos and we have a really good photo, especially of birds, the masking in between the toes is so important, because Lightroom loves to include all this as one object, and obviously it isn't. And when we change our exposure, when we change our blacks and everything like that in an image where we haven't gone through and checked, you know, these areas here, it does stand out. It looks silly. The sky looks a different color where we haven't done that. So it's always important to zoom in and take your time with that. For the purpose of a YouTube video, we aren't going to spend too long on it. Instead, we're just going to go and do the usual. Now, as you can see, it's not quite right. It could be that my aperture is a little low, so it's not quite got. This toe here is obviously closer to the camera than the head. It's not quite fully in focus on the head, so we're going to have to rely on keeping this quite a dark image and really sort of play with the light, because that's the interesting thing. This directional light that is really cool. And we also have the shadow. Now, I do like to use lines that we have in photos to help sort of make compositions look nicer. Something like that could be cool, but I also quite like the lean on the fence as well. So again, this is one of them ones that I'll come back to over and over and over again and decide how I want it to be. Behaviorally, it probably makes more sense to have the fence slightly slanted. And I think I also do want to zoom it out. I just think I prefer it. Because again, we can't rely too much on the detail of the bird because we don't have it. And I quite like this negative space. I don't mind it at all. So I do something like this. Now, contrast is going to be a big one on this because we have so bright brights and really dark darks. And it's quite straightforward to edit, really. I know what I like. It's not the best photograph in the world. It's never going to work well on socials, but for me, it tells a really cool story, and it also sort of captures this light that was so difficult to get to sit and see, essentially. So when we denoise it again, it's going to look a bit cartoony. We've lost texture for this really smooth animated style, whatever. So I'm going to take that down to 30, might even try 20. Just because, again, stop fighting the noise. If the noise is there, the noise is there. It's not anything to be shouted at or screamed at. It's a natural part of photography. The other thing I want to try and do is play with this shadow. Let's see what Lightroom does with that. See how it picks up a little bit of it in the object. Just because I think this is such a cool part of it. That's the insect shadow, there's the feet shadows, and then we have the tail here. So why not have a little play and just see what all these sliders do to that area. We can make it darker. Oh, I don't want to play with the highlights. See, that's another thing. Like, potentially that could have been nice, but fuck, it's horrible. And maybe a bit of contrast in there. And that would do for a first time edit. It's not bad at all. Maybe a little bit bright. We can take the exposure down slightly. Difficult. It's a difficult photo, but it's cool. It's a really cool image, and I'd rather have a cool, interesting image than a really sharp photo, something that, you know, you've seen 1,000 times. So I think that's nice. Tony Owls. This was a magical moment for me. This was special. One of my first proper photographs of a tawny owl. As you can see, it was quite a long way away from me, which is why we can't get it too sharp. And when we look at the original import, this is what we have. Now, this is one of them ones where it's so important to get it right in camera before anything else. Look at this tree here. Yep. We have the tree and we have the tawny owl. If I was stood, in fact, I might even have, let's see. Maybe not. Look how many photos I've taken of this thing. No, I don't. But if I was stood, maybe let's say 2 meters to my right, this tawny owl becomes lost in this tree. It becomes lost, and it makes it incredibly tricky to tell apart. And behaviorally and as an observer, that makes sense, but as a photographer, taking those extra few steps really helps us sort of digest this image easier. So If I'd have not taken those steps, then this would be a really tricky photo to edit, and I wouldn't potentially be able to save it. But for the sake of a meter, we've been able to add separation from the tree, from the owl, and that really helps us. So, immediate crop, 4:3. This is another one similar to the bat where I really like the environment. The colours, it's bright, the shapes. There's a lot going on to enjoy, and so why reduce it to a crop? That original photo you saw, I think that was my export for vertical social media usage. I'd rather export it myself as 2 different crops than let social media compress it, which is why I sometimes do that. But look at, I mean, that as an image is really nice. We have these sort of 2 sort of symmetrical slants. We have this nice, I'm pointing, but you can't see where I'm pointing. We have this really nice branch coming through. It really works as an image like this. You can play with your rotation, but besides, masking our tawny owl, playing with the texture, playing with the clarity, and then also duplicate and invert, potentially bringing the background back a few stops, a little bit warmer. I want the shadows up, and I also think if you look at the left eye here, it's a little bit dark. So I sometimes like to throw in a little radial mask, take the shadows up. You could also come into the eye, but I find that sometimes when we play with the eyes too much, it becomes a little bit unnatural because they shouldn't be like there. You see how it sort of looks off? The light is quite clearly coming in from the right, so that does make sense to me. Whereas if we just take the whole face up, we've still got the natural sort of way the light is coming, but we're also able to see the eye a little bit better. And then again, a little bit on the tone curve. Why I do this, I don't know. I just know it looks a little bit better. I don't know why Lightroom's doing that at the moment. And I'm also going to denoise it. There's not often an image nowadays that I don't denoise. The denoise process is really good. It can save an image, and even an image that doesn't need denoising, it can help. Just take it a couple of steps up. But look at sometimes what it does on this 50. It just looks awful. I hope that comes across on the video. So really be careful if you do use it. Just to, look at the difference. Look how soft. Focus on this bit here. See if I can zoom in more. Watch this face. You see at the moment, but if we take it down to 10, you see? We don't need, I'd rather the noise here than it smooth it out to the point where it looks wrong. So I'll leave it like that. And that is all I'd have to do for that image. So an image that could have been complicated to edit, but was saved by the in-camera shooting and the positioning and the awareness of where to stand and how to take the photo. Okay, so as I was filming this and editing this yesterday, I realized that these last 2 photos, they're video recorded, but the screen didn't. So we're gonna run through them again very quickly. I have my coffee, it's a new day, I apologize for the close. I'm trying to edit this very fast. So this is the next photo. Now this is a stunning barn owl from Bempton Cliffs. And it's one of them images where you really don't need to do much. I'll show you the before and after. See, I've done very, very little there. Most important things to change here would be the crop. Everything else kind of just happens. So let's cut back to import immediately for the crop. I know this is going to do well on social media, so I'm going to look to favor the vertical portrait crop. And I can probably punch in a little bit closer because it's a very close-up barn owl. There's all these details in the face that I want to try and show off and capture. So my crop's going to look something like this. Easy as that. I'm then going to look at, I could probably just do subjects for this one. Select my subject to mask. I'm going to carefully look and make sure all the talons are in, while also making sure that the background is out. So super easy. Obviously when you do this yourself, take a lot of care in just making sure that you have nothing clipping, because it does make a big difference in the final edit. Just look at that face, stunning. Okay, so that will do for the mask. I'm gonna adjust my texture and clarity just a little bit, don't need too much, and I'm also going to add a little radial mask on the eye, just because I know there's a lot of detail in the sort of amber colour of these eyes, which I don't think will look very out of place. There, you see that? That looks really good. Just the tiniest of difference, but something that adds a little bit of life to an image. Yeah, really like that. And then also something which I don't need to do, but it certainly doesn't hurt the image, is, let's go to the face. When I'm taking a photo, when I'm editing a photo, I'm always looking at what is the interest, what are people going to mostly connect with, what are they going to look at, and for this one it is the face. And I'm just going to pull the shadows up a little bit higher, just to really make sure that that pops, essentially, and that's it. We could always play with the background. Obviously this was a very dark and stormy day, so just pull that down a tiny bit. Tone curve, and that's probably all I would do. It's a very simple image to edit. It was one of them images that just, I could have posted it raw. It was that good, and that is completely down to positioning. It's completely down to the conditions of the day and not missing focus, which is 50-50 really for that. My photo of the year. This is a phenomenal story between the little owls which have moved into the barn and the barn owls which are obviously residents, both suspected to be breeding at the barn, and as a result we get a lot of chaos. It's a beautiful image. It's hard to edit because it is grainy and dark. This is what we were working with originally. You can see that my shutter speed is high and my ISO is also high. I'm zoomed out. Obviously don't be scared of zooming out. 300mm, I have a 200-600mm lens, so this is towards the end of the zooming out. I knew action was going to happen, or I knew action was likely, and so on a 600mm crop zoom, this is all I would have captured. I would have potentially got something like, not that. If I was lucky, I would have got the barn owl full frame, and I would have seen talons, and that's a crap photo. That's a crap photo, so don't be afraid to zoom out. Zooming out saved this image. It allowed me to capture this behavior, and then we can look at how we'd edit it. So obviously the first thing that I'm going to do is keep it horizontal. We want both owls, but I also need to make sure that both owls have space to breathe. I really love the positioning and the gap in between the two owls. It feels very purposeful, this gap, almost like if it was an artist painting it, that's how they would have done it. I want to make sure that it's nice and level, and this is something that I will take a little bit of time just to fiddle with, just to get them sort of, I want the eyes to be level, essentially, because I think that adds a nice balance to the image. Something like that, that's fine. Now both these owls are about the same distance away from the camera, they're on the same plane, so I can get away with masking them both on the same mask, and when I change the texture and clarity, it should be fine. The little owl is dark, and this is what we call high key photography. High key being super white background, you know, white birds. There's really not many shadows in the image. If we look at the tone curve, you know, these are all highlights, nothing else really going on. So we can play with the high key, we can take everything up and make it, you know, it is intentionally high key, or accidentally intentionally high key, so we'll run with it. And with an image like this, when we're looking at the details of the little owl, it's noisy, it's difficult. So I'm always going to be sticking on the zoom out, I don't think. And I'm not going to be forcing too much on the crop. Hit it with the denoise, obviously, because it's so grainy, and we finish off with something like that on the little owl, which obviously isn't great zoomed in, but zoomed out, we're very happy with. It's a really cool story. I might even push the crop just a little bit further, as much as I can, in these edges. Something like that. You know, we got space either side. We know what's happening. We have a story. We have the sizes, aggression with the owl, the little owl talons coming forward. We have the vole underneath. There's so much going on in this image that it doesn't necessarily need to be perfect to be good. I might take the temperature down just a tiny bit as well. Yeah, I like it. And it's that simple. It's that simple. Editing really doesn't have to be, as I drag this down, editing doesn't have to be complicated. It really doesn't. And I think when we start messing with cloning tools and removing tools, and we start getting too deep into masking and all this, obviously I mask, but I try and do it minimally. I think at that point we need to take a breath and we need to look at how we're actually taking these photographs in the field, because a lot of those edits become unnecessary when we're intentionally shooting, avoiding twigs, avoiding leaves. We're looking at the whole composition and everything like that. So if you do find yourself spending a lot of time in the edits, if that's something that you enjoy, then absolutely fine. If you're thinking I'm spending way too long on these edits and it's not where I want to be outside, then when you're outside, let's start photographing with intent. Let's start thinking about the outcome and position ourselves in a way where if something does happen, it's going to be a cool photo rather than chasing a cool photo in a moment that's already unfolding, if that makes sense.